Hello everyone, my name is Masha and today I'm going to finish some of the bracelets that I started about 10 years ago. So if you've watched my unfinished bracelet collection video, which I'll leave linked in the card and in the description, you would have already seen these bracelets. I talked about them a little bit before. These are some of the bracelets that I started making back in like 2009 or 2010 when I was just learning how to make friendship bracelets. This is one of my really early chevrons. This is a cute little heart pattern that I was trying out, and this is a diamond sort of pattern. You can see that I made a lot of mistakes here. Like you can see some of the red color popping through. You can see that the knots are just very loose, and I make a lot of mistakes in these. So I thought it'd be really fun to see what it would be like if I finished making these bracelets today, since I never got around to finishing them back in the day. I'm gonna start with this chevron bracelet, and looking at it, I can't really see, I don't think there are many mistakes here, if any. Like I can actually see a few on the back. There's some colors popping through, but that's the back. That doesn't really matter. On the front side, there aren't really any mistakes. The only thing I could say is that I wish the edges were a bit straighter and a bit more, you know, just neater in general. And I wish there was some sort of tie situation happening, because here I just tied a knot and started knotting it. There's nothing, this just looks really messy, and I don't do my bracelets like that anymore. I try to always have some sort of tie situation happening. You can also see that the knots were just made much looser, like they sort of, you can pull them apart and it's very, very loose. Let's see how it's going to turn out now.
We good?
So I've done a few rows, and you can already start seeing a noticeable difference. You can see that these rows are much thicker, much wider, and these, the ones I'm doing now, because I do my knots much tighter nowadays, they are thinner and much closer together. So I'm going to finish this bracelet off camera, and I'm going to catch up with you once I'm done. And there you go, my chevron bracelet is finished. I finished this one off with triangle ends and twisted ties at the end of my bracelet. And you can actually quite clearly see where I finished doing this years ago when I started doing it now. It's at this point here, if you haven't noticed. First of all, the bracelet is much thinner in the place where I start doing it now. And second of all, here you can see that the bracelet is really stretchy and it has holes in it, as you can see. Whereas the continuation that I made now is much more close together. It's not as stretchy, it's not stretchy at all. And there aren't any holes between the knots. This is me trying to pull my bracelet as hard as I can, and you can barely see the holes starting to come through there. So you can see that nowadays I make my knots much tighter than I used to. I also find it really interesting how the tie situation changed. As you can see, I never used to do the ties. I didn't realize that you could do ties, so I just sort of made a knot and started knotting the bracelet. Whereas now I do specifically triangle ends, and then I do beautiful twisted ties at the end of my bracelets to make them look nicer. So on to the next one. I'm going to be doing this bracelet now. This is a really cute heart pattern that I found. This was one of the first patterns I ever followed actually, and I'm gonna leave it down in the description below if you want to check it out. I made a loop with this bracelet, but the way I made it is just literally making a loop and tying a knot. I didn't do anything special. Nowadays when I make loops, I usually make knots around the loop to make it look nicer. With this bracelet you can see that I made some mistakes. Like here, for example, there are some knots that are wrong. You can see some colors poking through. You can also see that this bracelet is quite stretchy. You can see some holes in it, and the edges aren't straight at all. They're actually really wobbly. So I'm going to continue making this bracelet and we'll see what happens. And there you go. That is a significant difference in my opinion. With this one as well, you can definitely tell where the point is where I started making it now. The knots are again much closer together. They're not as stretchy as they are on the left. The hearts are much smaller. Everything is just closer together. It's much smaller and much neater than it was before. Also, you can see that the edges are much straighter, at least on the bottom half. On the top half, you can still see that there are some bumps here, but that is just unavoidable because there's a backward forward knot here. Every single time there's a bump, there's a backward forward knot. And you can't really avoid that unless you use the straight edges technique, which I didn't use in this bracelet. So that's why there's a bumpiness on this side, but not on this side. But yeah, overall, that's definitely a pretty significant difference. And That's pretty cool. So next up is this diamond patterned bracelet. And you can very clearly tell that I made a lot of mistakes in this bracelet. First of all, I mixed up the colors here and I ended up fixing it by dragging the string across the entirety of the bracelet. I don't know what I did, I can't really figure it out. And I decided that dragging the string, like you can see it popped off of here, I thought that that was the best way to fix it. I mean, I guess it worked because I ended up fixing it and it looks okay in the bracelet, but the back of it just looks ridiculous. It's also made very loosely. You can see that the knots are very, very loose. You've got little holes in all the knots, you can see through them, which isn't really an issue or a mistake, just more of a preference thing. I don't really like that anymore, so I tie my knots a bit tighter. There you go, you can really tell there. And the pattern sort of started to look weird right about here. So let's see how I'm gonna work on it now. There, look at that. You can really see how loose I used to tie my knots. That is not how I tie my knots anymore. Let me just show you a bracelet for comparison. So this is a pretty recent bracelet that I did, and that does not happen here at all. I tie my knots much tighter nowadays. So that's pretty interesting to see, but that's what I used to do. All right, so time to secure this bracelet onto my workspace. Why are these two tied together? These two strings are just knotted together at the bottom. Ugh, that's annoying.
We good?
I've only just done a few rows, but you can already see a stark difference to how I did it before and to how I'm doing it now. That is crazy. I wasn't expecting it to be so obvious. It shrunk. It literally shrunk. It went down and inward. Wow. I don't know what I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting that. I mean, it makes sense because I used to make my knots really loose, which is why the bracelet is much thicker. Now that I'm doing the knots how I usually make them, and I make them much tighter now, it shrunk and it became much thinner. That is just wow. I want to continue doing this and see how this is going to turn out. So let's continue. So while I'm doing this, I just wanted to do a quick sort of demonstration of how I do my edges now. So I can't really show you now because it's pinned up at the top, but at the top my edges are a little bit wonky and you might have seen that before. But how I do my edges now when I'm not using the straight edges technique, which I'm not in this bracelet. Again, the straight edges technique is a technique that allows you to keep your edges straight. The video for that is going to be in the card and in the description. But when I'm not using it, as I'm not here, I still try to make my edges straight by just doing them more carefully. So I'm just going to quickly show you how I do that. So for example, this thread, it goes to the left with a backward knot a few rows before that, and I now have to bring it back in here with a forward knot onto this red one. So I'm just going to very carefully do the first half of the knot as a forward knot, and I'm just going to pull it up to make sure. I always do this very carefully to make sure that nothing is poking out. Yes, you can still see that there's yellow string coming down like that, but it's not poking out to the side in a bump. So I did the first half of the knot, now I do the second half of the knot, which just secures it in place. There you go, now it's nice and straight. So whenever I'm doing my edges, I just do them very carefully and slowly, and if I don't like how it turned out, I untie it and I try it again. So it's just more of a trial and error sort of process when I'm doing it without the technique.
We good?
So wow, look at that. I've already done 2 bits of the bracelet and you can see what a difference that is to what I was doing before. So I'm gonna finish this bracelet off camera and I'm gonna catch up with you once it's done. So there you go, I finished the bracelet. There wasn't really that much left to finish because I've already done most of the bracelet back in the day, but still you can see a very clear difference. I also finished it off with triangle ends and twisted ties, true to the 2019 Masha knots fashion. Again, tutorials for both of those in the description. But wow, you can very clearly tell that these were made at 2 completely separate times. I didn't expect it to be that obvious, but it is. Look at that. It looks like two completely different people were making that. Which, I mean, I guess it is. I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago, but still, that's crazy. Look at that. There's no loop at the top. I mean, there is, but it's just string. It's not made in any way. It's all bunched up at the top. I mean, it's cute. I actually really enjoy looking at these to see how I used to make my bracelets back when I was just learning. But yeah, you can really tell that there is a massive difference there. So these are all 3 of the bracelets that I finally finished 9 or 10 years down the line. I can't believe it's been that long since I started them. It honestly doesn't feel like it's been that long. That's crazy how time works. But I found this really interesting. I never thought that I would ever finish these bracelets. They've obviously been with me for a long time. They've seen so much of my life. So many things have changed in these 10 years, and it's crazy how I haven't lost these bracelets. They've been with me throughout the entire thing. Maybe not physically, at some point they were in Moscow while I was in London, but they were always a part of my life ever since their conception, and really. And I think there's something beautiful in the fact that I managed to find them and managed to finish them. You can really see how much progress I've made from starting my bracelets with these loops that didn't do anything, or even just these ties like here, having them be really stretchy and have holes in them, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's just a different way that I used to make my bracelets. You can see that I made different mistakes here and here, and then to see what it is now, with the same string, with the same bracelet, nothing changed apart from the way I do my knots. I've progressed to the point where now all my edges are very nice and neat, apart from this one, which I talked about before. And I've learned how to make these triangle ties to make my bracelets look neater and nicer when they finish. I've learned how to do these twisted ends as well. I just think it's really cool how I managed to find these bracelets and got to finish them. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. It was definitely a fun one for me to film. If you do make anything based on any of my videos, even this one, as I said, links to the patterns are in the description. I always love to see your guys' creations on my Instagram, so send me pictures via DMs or tag me in a post that you make. I sometimes share you guys' posts on my stories as well. I want to thank you all for watching. I post videos every and I will see you. Bye!